You're listening to episode number 67 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. In this episode, I talk about a perception and interpretation that I have that there is no such thing as mind-boggling. Anything that you consider to be like crazy amazing or mind-boggling is nothing more than a limited interpretation. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. So, mind-boggling. I know I've mentioned before that my marketing team, they created my content calendar with 6 months of videos, and they picked all these titles based upon things they've heard me talk about. And I have to be 100% responsible. I didn't really scrutinize all the titles. And one of the titles obviously is, because this podcast is there is no such thing as mind-boggling. And as I sat here looking at this, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to make it cogent? How am I going to make it powerful? And the more I thought about today's episode, the more I thought, yeah, I really like this approach. Because somebody on the team just heard me say this at some point, and they're like, oh, that's a great idea. We'll name a podcast after that. Well, what they probably weren't thinking is that I've got to put 30 minutes of content behind that. So I sat down and I started thinking about today's episode. The first thing that came to mind was Saint Germain. Saint Germain was known or what's called a member of the White Brotherhood. He's also known as an ascended master. And Saint Germain said that, well, no, I didn't hear it personally, but I read it in one of the books called the I Am Discourse. And Saint Germain said something along the lines, I'm going to paraphrase, but he said something along the lines of this. If humans truly knew how the universe worked, they would cease to believe in miracles. Now that's powerful. If humans truly knew how the universe worked, they would cease to believe in miracles. And I think that many times things that we deem to be mind-boggling are things that we can't get our mind around because, just candidly, our models of reality are so darn limited for most of us. I'm going to go, and again, I don't have any notes here, so I don't know where I'm going to go, but I know where I'm going to go next, is I've heard people say before they work with a shaman, and that's not true. Many people work with shaman practitioners, people who study shamanism. You've heard me mention it a lot in these episodes. Shamanism, Shamanism, is the oldest form of thought on the planet. And that's great. I think it's powerful. Candidly, I think everyone should study shamanism because it's ancient wisdom that precedes all the religions. It's the oldest form of thought on the planet. But when I said earlier that most people actually look at the world from their very limited models of reality, they're using only what I call their 3D eyes. And I tell people there's a difference between seeing the world and looking at the world. When you look at the world, you might see a person, a personality, a situation, circumstances. When you see the world, you're seeing with what I call a different set of eyes. You're seeing with your sixth sense. You're seeing beyond ordinary reality. And when most of us look at the world from our 3D perspective, the world is, number one, as most of us know very, very little about it, and it's also very limited. I'm not sure if you know this, but scientists have literally proven that you can only experience 1% of what exists on the electromagnetic spectrum with your eyes and your ears and your 3D senses, meaning 99% of what exists in your world, in the universe, you can't even experience. And then with your five senses. And then when you listen to what Saint Germain said, that if we really knew how the universe worked, we would cease to believe in miracles. It makes perfect sense. In episode number 6 of the podcast, I don't know the exact title, but I said something like, I titled it something like Living from Your Highest Potential. And working with a shaman is all about, and I want to segue here for a second also, just because I've apprenticed with a shaman for 25 years doesn't really mean anything. I've had exposure to things that most people do not know that exist. I've had a great deal of experience with non-ordinary reality. But guess what? I'm in this bag of skin also, and I'm learning my lessons on this planet. And I'm definitely, no one is, air quote, perfect. And I'm learning my lessons just like everyone else is on the planet. But a fair amount of work with a shaman has been about non-ordinary realities. Actually, he was talking to me recently, and those that apprentice with him, and basically he was a little terse with us, and he said to us, he goes, it's about time that you get it. You must start operating from your second attention, not your first attention. And second attention is basically seeing all the energy in the world first, not the 3D atomic structure. But let me go back here. In episode 6, I was talking about living your highest potential. And in that episode, I said living your unlimited potential and your highest potential. And you hear all the motivational speakers, rah, rah, live your highest potential, blah, blah, blah. It's all 3D stuff. It's all about acquiring something or being something or having something or doing something. And living your highest potential as a being is silence, silencing your mind. Because when you can silence your mind, then you can hear. I know I'd mentioned in that episode also, Rumi said something like, if you want to hear, become silent. And that is the number one place that all of us started that work with my brother-in-law, the shaman, is starting to conquer the mind and silence the monkey, what we call the monkey brain, the reptilian part of the brain. But silence. Now, how does this apply to mind-boggling? Well, anything that you think is mind-boggling is nothing more than your interpretation, as I alluded to earlier. But what we do is we actually make things amazing or awesome or mind-boggling based upon our very limited interpretations of the world, which I just covered. But let me give you an example. Many years ago, I had a student, and he did something that many people would say and consider, and they have said and considered to be mind-boggling, amazing, crazy, and some superlative word or words. Now, what he did is when he was 57 years old, his wife actually had a heart attack prior and left the planet. No, actually, his wife had cancer and she left the planet. He was a single father, and he wanted to bring awareness to single parents. And when he was 57 years old, and this was a little over 20 years ago, he did not train for this, and he wasn't in shape. He ran 75 consecutive marathons. Now, obviously, a marathon is 26 miles, well, that's 26 miles. But when I said he told me that he ran, which it's all documented. There's a documentary made about him. He ran 25 or 26 plus miles every single day for 75 consecutive days. And I remember talking to him and I said, you ran 26 miles a day? And he's like, no. Many days we ran 30 miles a day based upon where we would stop and lodging and all this kind of stuff. Now, again, he was 57 years old. He just had a heart attack, for crying out loud, 3 weeks prior, and he ran 75 consecutive marathons. So, when we look at it, we could say, well, that's mind-boggling. But you know what? It wasn't mind-boggling to him. He went out and he did it. And that's why episode number 6 is also about stop talking to yourself, because it's the talking to yourself that keeps you trapped. Something that I tell my students in my transformational coaching program, and it's actually what I call the foundational premise for week number 1, is that we work from 100% possible 100% of the time. By the way, I'm hearing a little bit of clicking in my microphone. I think it's actually the mechanics of the microphone, not the microphone. So hopefully you can't hear it in the podcast episode. And if you can, I apologize, but there's nothing I can do, and I won't have time to re-record this because I'm on I'm on vacation this week, and I need to get this to the team so they can get it loaded. But let's go back there for a second. What if you truly believed? What if you truly believed that anything that you wanted to create in your life was 100% possible 100% of the time? And the reality is that there are no rules in life. I mean, there are no rules. I remember one time a guy told me when I mentioned this, he goes, "Well, there are rules." And I said, "Well, what are the rules?" And he suggested a religious text that was corresponding to his religion. And he said, "Here's the rules for life." And I said, "No, there are no rules to life." And think about that. I mean, you weren't born and you didn't have an owner's manual tucked into your diaper. So where I work from, and I've come to realize, and especially when we stop thinking about the 3D world in front of us, and we start thinking like Saint Germain, if possible, is that we live in a world of absolute possibility. And if you just stop for a second and you look like this guy that I mentioned, Terry, that ran 75 consecutive marathons. I mean, if I said to you, can you run 75 or walk 75 consecutive marathons? You'd probably say, well, heck no, I can't do that. And notice already where you're going. But I also want you to notice that's probably how you live your life, is that you've created early in life all these limitations about what you can do and what you cannot do. And notice, they're all in your mind. Now, I want to go somewhere else here, and I want to share that your entire life, pretty much, and this is crazy for a lot of people. I'm using the word crazy because it's just so alien for people. Is that pretty much most of your life is an interpretation? When I say an interpretation, most of us actually make facts out of our opinions and out of our interpretations, and we make our interpretations fact when interpretations are verifiable. And even if I ask you, I said, I want you to tell me 10 facts about your life. People have a hard time with that. They can get to one, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they start having a hard time after that. I mean, you could say, well, I am a male or a female, okay? And then some people could say, well, the sun comes up in the east. Well, that's a matter of perspective because guess what? If you're in a different place in the universe, it doesn't come up in the east because there is no east. But I want you to look, because east is only relative to the planet Earth. But I want you to look at your life. And everywhere that you're trapped in your life or you think that you're stuck, which I've told people before is that you're never stuck. It's only a matter of your thinking that's stuck, is simply an interpretation. So when we think things are mind-boggling, oh, that's amazing and I could never do that and that's crazy, it's nothing more than an interpretation. Now, something my brother-in-law, his language that he shared with me is that when we come to the planet, we have our seniority taken away from us. And I'm going to give you a simple version of it. I can dig into it much deeper, but I'm not going to, but I'll give you the simple version. Basically is that we are extraordinary cosmic beings when we come to the planet. And then we come, and I might have some people fighting back on this, and that's fine, but this is a very primitive planet that we live on. Quite literally, people will say, well, we're an advanced civilization. No, we're not. That's ridiculous thinking. And if we're so advanced, then why do we fight like territory and land like dogs? Why has the planet spent over $100 trillion in the last 100 years on warfare? Why do we kill each other? Why do we maim each other? Why do we burn down our planet? Why do we pollute our planet? I mean, do you think an advanced species would do that? So, as humans, we're not an advanced species and we're full of fear and limitations and all these things. But when we incarnate into the body, we are an extraordinary cosmic being. So talking about the word my brother-in-law uses is seniority, meaning that we are senior cosmic beings, and then we incarnate on the planet, we forget everything about our seniority. It's like we're born with a bag over our head, and then we're infected by the world that we live in with the hate and the anger and the greed and the fear and all these kind of things. So the reason that I share that is that you've heard me say before, maybe, is that we're not, people will say, well, we're human beings or we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Even spirituality, people turn into dogma. I say that we are cosmic beings because you are an infinite cosmic energy currently incarnated in a human body. Now, let's take this ground level. So that's like 30,000 foot view. Let's come and look at ground level. Now, I want to give you an example here of one of my cousins, and I'm so reticent sometimes to even give you guys examples because I will get some emails from people that, and overall, we're going to do 1 million downloads our very first year, and the number of complaints I've gotten are so minuscule compared to the others that I'm able to serve. But I want to give you an example here of one of my cousins. And I'm going to use my sister's words, not my words, so I don't get some pushback by, oh, Jim, you're so judgmental, blah, blah, BS. Anyway, one of my cousins many years ago, and the example that I'm giving you about stopping thinking and that when we overthink, which I haven't gotten to yet, but like the person who ran 75, consecutive marathons, he didn't think himself out of it. And one of my cousins one time, she worked a minimum wage job for a lot of years, and she had bad credit and apartment hopping and all this kind of stuff. Now, this was a lot of years ago. And in my interpretation of the world, I used to think many years ago, if you're going to buy a car, then you need good credit and, stable job and all that. Well, I didn't know that's not true because you just pay 24, 28% interest and they really gouge you. But anyway, my sisters and I were at my mom's one afternoon and just hanging out with mom a lot of years ago, and my cousin drove up front of the house and she hit the horn on her car. And we walked outside and she was driving a brand new car. And now, mind you, my limitation was I thought you had to have steady job history, good credit, down payment, all this kind of stuff. And I looked at one of my sisters and I said, how did she buy a brand new car when, no job, bad credit, etc.? And what my sister said to me was very powerful. Now, my sister was the one being judgmental, not me, so I want to clarify. And by the way, everyone's judgmental. It's just a matter of the degree because we're meeting making machines as human beings. But my sister, I said, how did she buy a new car? And my sister said, oh, that's easy. She's too stupid to know that she can't do it. Or she's too stupid to know that she couldn't do it. And it's always stuck with me because guess what? She wasn't playing by the rules that I was playing by and a lot of the world plays by. And even I want to share with you, I've heard people like Steve Jobs say that he wants to be or wanted to be the stupidest person in the room. And I'd have to go find that quote to verify it. But his whole intention is that when I do not know anything, that's when I learn more. So I want to share with you, even though it's as simple as a car and stuff like that, and let's go beyond mind-boggling. Let's change it a little bit. There's no such thing as mind-boggling. Let's look at it as there's no such thing as limitations. In that you've heard me say before that you can have anything that you want in life. Now, that being said, look at your own life. So the guy who ran 75 consecutive marathons, if I said, hey, let's go do it, what's your first thought? Literally right now, as you're thinking, what is your first thought when I say, you know what, we're not going to train. You and I are going to start 75 consecutive marathons starting tomorrow. What's your first thought? What's your first thought? To give you an example, I'll just hop around here. What if I said, you know what, one of your family members needs additional medical help and you need to come up with $20,000 per month to pay for their medical care? What is your thought? What is your thought if I said, you know what, you can buy that new $2 million home or you can have that $150,000 Mercedes? What are your thoughts? Now, I want you to notice what your thoughts are for the things that I just talked about, which was what, like medical care, $150,000 car, a $2 million home, etc. Look at your thoughts. Seriously, because that tells you the context, which is the frame of your thinking that you're already working from. And you're definitely not working from 100% possible 100% of the time. And you're definitely getting trapped into things are mind-boggling. Or guess what? Basically, most of us are even stopped before it's even mind-boggling. If we talk about a house, we could say $150 million, which there's a house in Dallas right now for sale for that amount, I believe. It's actually a family friend lives on that street. I think the house is $150 million for sale. And we could say that's mind-boggling. Well, that's a heck of a lot of money for a house, in my interpretation. But most of us don't stop there. Most of us stop far shorter than that, saying, "Oh, 2 million for a house. Oh my gosh, that's mind-boggling. So I just want you to look at where you're working from. You're working from frames, and the frames keep you trapped. Now, I want to share a personal story with you. So you've heard me talk many times about my brother-in-law being a shaman, like the real kind you would find in the Amazon or something. He lives in Dallas, as you may have heard me say in another podcast. He's very inexpensive. He has a year-long waiting list, literally. He's very, very inexpensive. And he works with people that want to physically heal when doctors can't heal them, or he wants to help them accelerate their healing, or people that want to grow in terms of, I'm going to use the word spiritually, meaning learning how to use dream time and their second attention and their higher sense and quieting the mind and etc. Now, I travel with him, and a couple of years ago, I'm going to be very general here in what I say, but a couple of years ago I was traveling, and I was sitting on the back porch, and actually I'm traveling with him now for a couple of weeks. He's at my house in Sedona, and he walks out, and he's having me. Let me just think how I want to language this. He was having me experience some things. I'm going to leave it at that, and read between the lines. And he came back to me again, and he came back to me a fourth time and said, "Here you go, do it again." And I said, "No, no, I can't. I've already done four." And he said something to me that changed my life. I mean, just transformative for me. He said, "Why? Why are you counting?" And I thought about it. Yep, I counted one, I counted two, I counted three, I counted four. Because if I had never counted, I wouldn't even know that I was on four. Hopefully that makes sense. And he said, stop counting and go beyond your limits. And even the way that he said that, he didn't, the way that he said it was like acknowledging that I was getting into my limits and go beyond my limits. And I love that phraseology. But I also noticed in that moment that when I was counting how many experiences I'd had, I was also in that moment quantifying and qualifying by my 3D world. And when I stopped counting, guess what? I got out of that world. So even in your own life, look at all the places that you're quantifying and qualifying and you're counting. Counting the money in your bank account, counting how many times you go to the gym, counting how many squats you did, how many reps that you did. You know, like I said, these aren't, I don't have any notes for these. And I remember many years ago, and then I'll keep going here. A friend of mine, I used to work out 5 days a week, free weights, when I was a young guy in my 20s and 30s, to late 30s. And a friend of mine was spotting me on the bench. And he said, Jim, he goes, you need to add 20 more pounds to your bench press. And I said, Doug, I can't do it. And he's like, no, you can do it. And I'm like, Doug, I can't do it. And so I did my reps and I went and got water. And we added a little bit, I think, but I went and got to the fountain and got some water. I came back and I just knocked out my next set of repetitions. And he goes, look at the weights. And he had added 10 pounds to each side. And I didn't see him do it. And I did it because I didn't know that he had added the weight. And that's what we do in our minds is we quantify and qualify. And I lifted the weight because I didn't know the extra weight was there. Let me share something with you, and I'm not obviously a Navy SEAL, but I read a lot of history, I watch a lot of Discovery Channel and stuff like that, and learning and documentaries and all that. And I may boggle this, and if a Navy SEAL is listening, I apologize. But the Navy SEALs have what's called the rule of 40%. And the rule of 40% is that, and again, I apologize if I get it wrong, but I know that the statistics are correct, meaning the numbers 40, 60. The rule for Navy SEALs is that when you think that you're 100% done, there's still 60% left in you. You're only at 40% of capacity. So, apply that as best we can back to there's no such thing as mind-boggling. I mean, when you think something's mind-boggling, you are only at 40%. You know, earlier when I was talking about Terry running 75 consecutive marathons, being 57 years old, having a heart attack just prior and doing it and no training. I mean, again, when we think about that, we're like, wow. And I thought about Roger Bannister as well. You might know that Roger Bannister is on record the first person to break the 4-minute mile. And no one, as we know, I don't know, but I've read, no one broke the 4-minute mile until Roger Bannister, and after that time, thousands of people have gone on to break the 4-minute mile. And what I thought about was the Wright brothers. You know, the Wright brothers who discovered flight. And when I say discovered, I could have somebody out there that's a bigger geek than I am with history and everything else, and they could say, no, anyway, someone else did it. I don't know. But in culture, we know that the Wright brothers are the one. We've been taught that the Wright brothers are the ones who discovered flight, even though somebody could say, well, Leonardo da Vinci was back in the 1500s exploring flight. Anyway, but here's the thing. What I find amazing about that is that the Wright brothers had no evidence. They had no evidence. Like Roger Bannister, he had no evidence that he could break the 4-minute mile. And the Wright brothers had no evidence that they could get a contraption up off the ground. But the way that most of us live our lives is that we look for evidence. And then we think, well, if other people haven't done it, then I can't do it. Why? Because we're looking for evidence. And that's when I go back to which is going to be, I think, the transformational takeaway this week is 100% possible 100% of the time because there are no rules. There are no rules for us being human beings. I mean, there are no rules that people cannot run 75 consecutive marathons or they can't buy cars when they have bad credit. And so I want you to, I want to bring it down to the ground. As I said, I'm laughing here. When I read this title, I'm like, oh gosh, what am I going to do with that in the podcast? And I'm actually enjoying doing this episode because really what it translates into beyond there's no such thing as mind-boggling, because that's what keeps people trapped. What it translates into more than anything is possibility. And everything, healing, health, wellness, everything is possible for you. Now here's the thing, back to episode number 6, I believe. For things to be possible for us, because my brother-in-law once said to me, he said something along the lines, and when he uses the word warrior, meaning spiritual warrior, and he said something to me one time. He said, when the warrior, not the worrier, but the warrior, because with the worrier, for sure it's not going to happen. When the warrior stops talking to himself, even the craziest of tasks becomes possible. So like my cousin, she wasn't talking to herself about her bad credit and no money down. She just stopped talking to herself and she went and did it when she bought the car. And the same thing with you and in my transformational programs. One of the themes all the way through, all the weeks, is stop thinking and move your attention. Okay, so your transformational takeaway, and I hopefully, you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed creating it, but your transformational takeaway this week is 100% possible 100% of the time. Okay, so the next episode is obviously going to be a Monday Q&A episode, and I picked this episode because it's near and dear to my heart, because so many people, and I see it and I've been there, so many people live with so much self-destructive anger in their lives. And the next episode the question is how do I manage my anger? And that's the exact question that I got, is how do I manage my anger? And when I saw that, I'm like, you know what? A lot of people need to hear my response and what I've learned about anger. And I'm going to actually, the operative word is manage. A lot of people need to hear what I want to share about anger, and that's going to be our next episode. All right, so I want to say again, before we go to the outro, which is pre-recorded, I appreciate you. My team sent me our download numbers a couple of days ago, and this podcast, thanks to you, I'm very grateful to you, will have over 1 million downloads its very first year. I mean, that's mind-boggling. And I'm just making that up, but that's a lot of episodes for a podcast. I mean, it puts us like way up there in the percentile. But you know what? I couldn't do it without you. So I want to again say thank you so much for allowing me to serve. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and I'll catch you over on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily,
Connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.